non-conforming uses, and also to use new tools to develop more walkable communities. Yesterday in the committee, you heard many times that the conversation would still be continuing, and I'm here on behalf of the coalition to say that we very much look forward to those conversations. And in particular, looking to two proposals, the proposals on main streets and on transit-oriented development that were taken out of the bill, and we hope will be restored in some fashion after further conversations. We think that together these provisions, which would create 2 to 4 family units, would help to fill what we think is a missing gap in Connecticut's housing stock. They'll create not only more housing, but more jobs, more opportunities, more revenues for state and local governments, and they'll provide an alternative to the sprawl that's ravaging our natural environment. So with that, just wanted to say I'm very confident that this legislature will meet the moment with bold and comprehensive legislation, and will find a way to enable the construction of new housing that we desperately need. We urge swift action, not just on the zoning reform proposals, but on the array of proposals that are before the legislature this year. So to talk about his perspective on these issues, I'd like to turn it over to State Treasurer Shawn who will come up there.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you, Desegregate Connecticut, and thank you for all the advocates that have come together around this critical issue. Sara said, I think the magic words, meet the moment. Meet the moment. We've been through a lot as a state and as a nation, and the question is whether or not this legislature will meet the moment. This issue is very personal to me. The history of segregation in America and right here in Connecticut is real. The impacts have been harmful. My parents left segregated Georgia, came north to segregated Connecticut, and I was the beneficiary of a desegregation busing program called Project Concern, where I traveled 2 hours each way, public transportation, from Hartford to Manchester, Connecticut, to get a quality education. That's one of the steps. That's part of my story. And so segregation, it's about quality, access to quality housing for all people. It's about access to quality education. It's about access to quality health outcomes. It's about access to economic opportunities. It's about access and equality. This issue is critical to the future of the state of Connecticut if we are to be a just and equitable society. And right now, it's time for us as leaders to meet the moment. And I am urging this legislature to support this bill. I applaud the committee co-chairs for getting it out of committee, and that is just one step along this journey. I know that there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of controversy around this bill, but this is a reasonable first step, along with a number of other measures that are underway to deal with equity in our state. And so with that, the last thing I'd like to just acknowledge as a former city council president, that I appreciate and I am sensitive to issues of local influence control. But what this is about is changing the status quo. This is about putting some level setting ground rules and parameters in place throughout our state to make it equitable. This is not about taking over local control. And so, again, I applaud Desegregate Connecticut, and I look forward to this legislature and the governor meeting the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn next to Senator Anwar, somebody who's been with us from the very beginning, the Deputy President pro tempore of the Senate, the chair of the Committee on Children, and the vice chair of the Housing Committee, and again, a very important ally of ours since the very beginning. Senator.
Thank you so much, Professor Bronin, for your leadership. Thank you, Desegregate Connecticut, and thank you, Representative Kristen McCarthy-Way and Senator Cassano. I'm a member of the Planning and Development Committee, and I have seen both of them show their leadership, their patience, and working closely with each other, but also with the community, and keeping an important vision in mind as they give opportunity for everyone to say their piece. I want to talk about two words that I want you to leave with. One is the demographics, the other is sustainability. Now, demographics, here's the reality. We are an aging population in our state. As people age, they want to actually downsize. The opportunity for downsizing in our state is very minimal. The people who want to stay in their own communities where they have grown, they have lived their entire life, they do not have those opportunities. And as people age and they retire, their income decreases as well, and that is the time they want some opportunities and options available to them. Second part of demographics, our young population. We lose younger population. Our smartest minds in the country are in the state of Connecticut. If you look at the number of patents that are coming out of the country, we are amongst the top 4 or 5 in the entire country to create the patents, but everybody leaves. Why? We cannot afford to house our young people and give them options and opportunities here. And that's part of the major problem that we have. That's why we have to have a solution for this. When people actually go through challenges with their income potential, they do not have an option, that they have to figure out a way to either downsize or decrease or move to a different part of the state and leave their home, their community, and the people that they grew up with. This is the demographic shift. The other demographic aspect is that we all have, by design, historically, kept our minority communities in different areas. If the state is, and I'm jumping to sustainability right now as well at the same time, no state, no community can survive if 50% of the African American, 50% of the Latino community are going to live in 2% of the land. That is where we are. This is not sustainable. When 2/3 of all African Americans, the black community, 2/3 of all Latino community, they are living in the low opportunity areas. And the chances of moving from a low opportunity area to a high opportunity area is the least in this entire region. Connecticut is the most segregated state in this entire region, and this is not sustainable. When you are any company, any business that is going to come, they want workforce. We don't have workforce opportunities here because workforce cannot afford the housing. It is all linked together. This is a no-brainer. And what is the therapy? What is the prescription for this? The prescription for this is part of what SB 1024 does. This is what needs to be done, is we need to have a zoning reform. And a lot of groundwork has been done. It is amazing, again, Professor Bronin, your work, the work that all the volunteers and people that have done, that is actually showing us the opportunities that we have to start to move forward and be with the time and make sure we invest in policies. This is a win-win strategy. Why? Because the state is not spending any money. We are just making better rules, better systems, which are going to give opportunities. And this is also something that has been done and proven to work. And when we do this, our population, the demographic shifts, will be able to fix what needs to be done. They will improve. Our younger population will stay. The cost of housing is going to decrease. The affordable housing numbers are going to improve. And the workforce is going to be able to stay in our state. And we will give opportunity and diversify the towns. And any town that has been diversified, the capacity of the children improves, the educational capacity of the children improves. These paths have been proven, these stories have been taken care of, have been addressed, understood, and all the myths have been busted already, what you are going to hear from various people in other parts of the state and other places that you would hear from. All of those things have answers, and that's why this is the time for everybody to unite with one voice, support this bill, move forward, and let's move in the right direction with this. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And with that, we'll turn to Omena McCoy, a policy analyst at the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness.
Good afternoon, and thank you to Professor Bronin and to Desegregate Connecticut, who have done a phenomenal job in advocating for zoning reform for the state of Connecticut. My name is Omena McCoy, and I am the Senior Policy Analyst for the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. I speak before you today as an employee of a coalition with more than 100 shelters, municipalities, businesses, and individuals committed to ending homelessness in Connecticut. Our goal is to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. At CCEH, we fundamentally believe, and research demonstrates, that the cost of homelessness is expensive. It costs our public systems more to leave our homeless population without adequate housing options than it does to help them secure housing and provide them with resources needed to keep their housing. We fundamentally believe that we must always strive to create different iterations of impact for a population of people that sees themselves living differently, see themselves living housed. Our annual one-night census of the homeless population last January showed that roughly 3,000 individuals, including 300 families, are homeless on any given night in the state of Connecticut. We are proud that our state has been able to reduce homelessness by 35% since 2007, and yet there is still so much more work to be done. And while the streets, the bus stops, the alleyways, and shelters in our towns and cities are the places where our homeless neighbors lay their heads down at night, these are not the places where our state's homeless populations see themselves long-term. Ultimately, they envision themselves having stable employment, having stable housing. The issue is that when this moment finally does arrive for them and their families, they'll find a severe lack of affordable and high-quality housing in the state of Connecticut. The high cost of housing, along with the shortage of affordable housing and housing diversity, is owed in large part to restrictive land use laws that perpetuate racial segregation, housing injustice, and economic inequity. At CCEH, we support Senate Bill 1024, as this legislation seeks to increase the state's housing supply, diversify our housing stock, and create more equity in communities occupied by our marginalized members. Now, key provisions of the bill as of yesterday, including transit-oriented development and development near main streets, have been removed from this bill. But let me just say this now. As members of our homeless population begin to envision themselves living differently, it will be critical for them to occupy housing that is that is close to where they can obtain their basic necessities. In addition, the increased foot traffic from work to home will help them build a greater sense of community among residents. The state of Connecticut must continue to take action to promote housing accessibility and affordability. Those who envision themselves living differently depend upon it. Shelters help to save lives, but it is housing that helps to end homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omena. Turning now to one of our co-sponsors of our bill, Senator Derek Slapp from right next door in West Hartford. Thank you.
Thank you, Desegregate Connecticut. Thank you, Representative McCarthy-Vahey and Senator Cassano, for your leadership. I want to give a special acknowledgement to Ben Winograd, Town Councilor in West Hartford, who has been leading the charge on reforms and establishing ASUs in West Hartford. Ben, thank you for your leadership as well. And he also testified and waited many, many hours to testify in support of this important legislation. You know, right now, halfway across this country, there's a murder trial underway. And I would say that the entire country is looking at what happens in Minnesota. They're demanding justice. People are not just only looking at what happens there, though. They're looking all across the country to see what states can achieve real progress and to make sure that what started last summer was not just a moment, but what is a sustainable movement, and this legislation is part of that. I joined my Senate colleagues last summer on the other side of the Capitol, and we were working on the police accountability bill then. We were one of the only states actually to pass important legislation like that last summer. And we hoisted the Black Lives Matter flag above the Capitol, and we all pledged that this would be the beginning and not the end of this important work. And that's what this legislation is about. Sure, it helps create jobs, and absolutely it will make housing more affordable for everybody. It will help the environment. It will help curb sprawl. It will help strengthen our economy. It does all of those things. It is also, I believe, to my core, the right thing to do, because zoning at its best can bring people together. And that's what this legislation has the ability to do. I think we're very good in Connecticut of paying lip service sometimes to equality and progressive ideals. We like to pat ourselves on the back and say we're this blue state, we always do what's right, but we don't always. And I don't know if we'd be having this conversation if it wasn't for George Floyd's murder last year. That's sad, and that's too bad, and that's something that we all need to think about and reflect on. But now we have an opportunity, as my colleague said, to meet the moment, to help bring people together and be a stronger, better, fairer state. This legislation is about that, and I am really excited to be able to help move this along. I'm grateful to my colleagues and all the legislative champions and the civic activists and just the people who are coming together to hopefully get this over the goal line. So thank you very much.
Move that down a little. Thank you, Senator Slapp. I'm going to turn now to Marc Okun, who is the leader of the Carpenters Union here in the state, and also members of our coalition.
Thank you, Professor Bronin, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. We're talking about this legislation because it brings something that Senator Slapp brought up, jobs. We joined the coalition because it's one of the most important things is closing the skills gap in this state. Yesterday, it was announced a $2.3 trillion infrastructure plan, budget plan by the President of the United States. We had a press conference this morning talking about infrastructure for the state of Connecticut. Well, where are those people going to come from? Where are they going to live? Our apprenticeship and trainer program currently has a 51% minority participation, which is huge. Out of 400 apprentices in this state, there's 51% are minority. The problem is that we have is the outskirts in the different parts of the state, there's not affordable housing, and there's not housing that allows them to commute closely to their work. This legislation really brings forward to light what everyone has been speaking about with the issue of segregation. Now, jobs are one of the most important things. Jobs keep people from being homeless. Jobs keep people being able to afford housing. But if housing is unaffordable, and if housing is unobtainable, then it doesn't really make a difference. Today I was meeting with a developer, and during the public hearing, there was conversation about the multifamily housing and developers, where the developers come in and do this and developers come in and do that. Multifamily housing is not owned by large developers. It's owned by people like me that have gone through and will buy a dilapidated house or build a house and rent it to support my income. As a carpenter, I didn't work year round. I only worked during the months when the weather would support it. So there's people in the building trades that own multi-family housing to support themselves by they renting out part of their house. This bill allowing for more housing to be built to allow for people that are in the trades to be able to develop this type of housing, it would be great. Now, the transit-oriented development being left out is pretty sad. As I said earlier, we have a huge infrastructure amount of money coming in that's going to be supportive of transit, trains. Talk about trains coming through Hartford and trains coming through the entire state. Well, if we don't build housing to support it, we're going to be in big trouble. We need to build those with jobs. The residential construction industry is the gateway to construction. Whether it's as a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, that's where people learn. And we need to fill those jobs. I appreciate everyone's time, and hopefully this moves along. And I think that it's one of the most important pieces of legislation that came out this year, in my opinion. It's going to really change the state. It's going to change the face of the state, and it's going to change the face of each individual town. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, I'll turn to another member of our coalition, Shawn, Ghio, Policy Director for Partnership for Strong Communities. Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you, Professor Bronin. I also want to thank the co-chairs of Planning and Development Committee, Representative McCarthy-Vahey, Senator Cassano, other members of the Planning and Development Committee for all the hard work you've done on these land use reform bills this year. Thank you, Senator Anwar. As Professor Bronin said, I'm Shawn Ghio. I'm Policy Director of Partnership for Strong Communities. We're a statewide homelessness and affordable housing advocacy organization based right here around the corner in Hartford. We're looking to, we work very closely with Connecticut Coalition on Homelessness to end homelessness in the state and also to expand affordable housing opportunities across the state. So we're very excited that several bills, including SB 1024, have made it out of the Planning Committee. And like you've heard from others, we're very hopeful that we can get back in place some of the provisions that were taken out as the conversations continue, especially provisions around middle housing and expanding transit-oriented development at our transit stations across the state. And obviously, as you've heard, last year's heightened awareness of racial and economic disparities of our state, really we've been ignoring for too long. And particularly around issues of exclusionary zoning practices in areas of Connecticut that have been segregated for generations. The bottom line is Connecticut needs more homes, more people in all of our towns. Our towns can be great places to live and can be more affordable at the same time. And really, these proposed reforms are necessary first steps in a very complicated, unraveling, complex, expensive zoning process. We know through research that Connecticut's high housing costs and existing land use regulations are a driver of its economic stagnation. Accelerating the development of affordable and lower cost housing such as accessory apartments and duplexes, small multifamily buildings, like the last speaker was talking about, a traditional form of housing in Connecticut that we've seemed to have forgotten in the last several decades. It's critical to developing those lower cost forms to attract businesses to the state, to increase household formation, enhance economic growth, and strengthen municipal and state fiscal fortune. A community grows stronger when it offers opportunity to the full spectrum of people that our society relies upon. But communities suffer when housing choice and supply are restricted. Right now, there's more than 200,000 households in the state that spend more than half of their income on housing costs. That's more than 1 out of 8 households. This is obviously, I think, to everyone, should be a clear sign of an unhealthy housing market. The state has been failing to deliver enough of the right housing. Restrictive zoning regulations are a key factor. Connecticut consistently ranks as one of the lowest rates of residential building permits in the country. Our restrictive zoning practices are a key to that. We simply cannot successfully grow our economy without providing the variety of housing that workers and families need to succeed in life in Connecticut. Thank you.
And I'd like to speak on behalf of the BPRC, our Vice Chair, Representative Gibson, our CHDC Chairman, Representative Miguel Castro, And I'd just like to make a quick statement on communities of color in Connecticut face disparate outcomes in health, education, and other services. And we are seeing these divides exacerbated by COVID-19. Zoning reforms and access to housing are integral to expanding equity, opportunity in these communities across the state. Nationally, Congress has passed legislation that will link funding to the states and municipalities that eliminate exclusionary zoning laws. One of my greatest concerns in 2021 session is housing transformation and housing reform and what that looks like. As I stated earlier, one of the 8 pillars of the BPRC is housing reform. And I would like to thank our esteemed chair in that committee, Representative Brandon McGee, who's been a champion for housing reform for years. Treasurer Shawn Wooden mentioned Connecticut is one of the most segregated states in the nation. We're also 49th in affordable housing. So it's a place that has nowhere to go but up, and looking forward to the challenge. And I do want to thank the leadership in zoning planning, especially my colleague, Representative McCarthy-Vehy and Senator Cassano for their leadership. And the BPRC and CHDC is here in support in everything we can do to move this forward. Thank you, Professor Bronin, for your work as well. Thank you.